Welcome back to the Imperfect PCOS podcast. I am just so over the moon that we get to talk to Dr. Shawn Tassone today. Shawn Tassone, MD, Ph.D. He is known as America's holistic gynecologist. He's the first physician in the U.S. to be double board certified in obstetrics and gynecology and by the American Board of Integrative Medicine. How cool is that? He holds a medical degree in addition to a PhD in mind-body medicine. Dr. Tassone is a practicing OB-GYN in the Austin, Texas area, hormonal expert, author, speaker, highly rated patient advocate, creator of the world's first integrative hormonal mapping system, and host of the Confessions of a Male Gynecologist podcast, which I was a guest on, and it was a great episode. In his 20 plus years of practice, he's listened to over 50,000 women's stories and is determined to remove the myths surrounding women's health. As an integrative health practitioner, he believes that you should have an active role in your care. His work includes studies and publications on hormonal imbalances, spirituality and medical care, whole foods to heal the human body, and integrative medicine. Dr. Tassone is featured in many publications, including the New York Times, NBC News Online, Stanford MedX, to name a few. His latest book, which I have read cover to cover and absolutely love and recommend, The Hormone Balance Bible, published by HarperCollins, is available for purchase worldwide. Welcome, Dr. Tassone.
You're listening to the Imperfect PCOS Podcast, where we share no BS science-backed strategies to put your PCOS into remission. I'm your host, Corey Ruth, aka the Women's Dietitian. Let's get into it.
Thank you so much for joining us today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, I want to know sort of your journey to becoming a doctor. And I also have been so intrigued by your title of America's holistic gynecologist.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can call yourself.
Right, exactly.
I made it up.
All right, well, perfect. I want to know how you came to that, how you decided to make that up. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you decided that you wanted to be a doctor, you wanted to get into the medical field, and what led you to where you are.
I'll try to keep it brief, but over the years, I think the story arc has changed. Initially, I think when I was in school, when I went to college, that's what I wanted to be. And looking back at it, I think when you're that young, you look at the job security, the prestige, the things like helping people, you get all the answers that pretty much everybody gives.
Right.
But when my mom died, about 21 years ago, I was a second year resident in OB-GYN. And when she passed, I had this feeling like I knew she died of ovarian cancer. And I had this feeling like I knew a lot about the disease process. I knew ovarian cancer. I knew all that stuff and surgery and chemo, but I didn't know how to make my mom feel good in between those episodes because she lived for about 5 years. And when she passed away, I just kind of promised her. I mean, it was kind of like one of those, I don't know, hallmark moments where you say, I'm just never going to let this happen to somebody else kind of a thing. So I knew I needed to learn something. I just didn't know what it was. When you're in a spiritual crisis, you go to Sedona. So that's what I did. And I was living in Tucson at the time. So it was only a couple of hours away. And I was reading this book at the time called 8 Weeks to Optimum Health by Andrew Weil, who's the guy with the big white beard. And he kind of founded integrative medicine. And at the back of the book, there was this little deal that said, hey, if you're interested in learning more about this, we're in Tucson. And I was like, well, that's amazing. So I joined the program. It was a 2-year program. And in that program, there was this 8-week module on spirituality and health. And that sent me down another rabbit hole. So I spent 6 years getting a PhD in philosophy, where I focused on mind-body medicine and traveled around South America and Mexico and did some work with shamans and just kind of learned different modalities of healing. And then kind of got into some archetypal work with Caroline Mace and Sally Hogshead. And I just kind of went in all these weird directions. And so I came back in and I was like, well, now I kind of have to put all this, I'd like to use all this somehow. And so I joined, or I took the board certification for integrative medicine, and I was the first gynecologist in the States, in America, to be board certified in OB-GYN and integrative medicine.
Wow.
And really kind of put myself out there about 6-7 years ago. And so that's kind of how it all came together. And why I'm kind of here today, and why I'm doing what I do. A man in a woman's world, as it were.
That's
Because
amazing.
because of my mom, I guess. And then, but if I
Yes.
look before that real quick,
Mhm.
in that Ph.D. program, we had to put up this, what you would look at it maybe as a genogram, where you have circles and squares,
Mhm.
and you look at 3 generations, and they do it for genetics, but we were doing it
Right.
for relationships. And I did my family, and we did 3 generations of family members, and all of my maternal bonds in my thing were conflicted. My mom and me, my dad and his mom, my mom and her mom, it was just
Mm.
all these conflicted lines in a maternal fetal bond. And so I kind of looked at that and I said, well, maybe on some weird unconscious level, that I was going into this profession to try and maybe fix that in my own family somehow. So on a
Wow.
woo-woo level, that might be one reason why I'm here too.
That is so cool. I wish every doctor was as cool as you are, by the way.
Well,
Um,
we should hang
and
out for 5 minutes. Maybe you'll
yeah,
change your mind. I don't know.
we are
I
hanging out.
try. I try.
I think it's so important to blend those two worlds, because they're so often separated, and they can very peacefully coexist, as we see in your work. And I do recognize myself in some of the work that you do, coming from a conventional background, when it comes to dietetics, and then also, the kind of the study of nutrition, and can be sort of, in a sense, pitted against that as woo woo, so it's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of you can blend the two together, and you can create this beautiful harmony. And I think that's what resonates in people now. And I do remember in reading your book, because I read your whole book cover to cover,
Thank you.
about your story with your mom, and something that you mentioned about growing up with a single mom, and that resonated so much with me, being a single mom for a good part of my life. So I love learning about your journey. I think it's
Thanks.
truly inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so your work now, what are some of the most common conditions that you treat? What are some of the most common things that you see? What are women coming to you for the most help with?
When I first started writing my book about 5 years ago, when you write a book, and I think you're kind of in this process,
I am.
you have to find a problem, and then you have to fix a
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
What I did, and then they also people like kind of unique things. There's a million books on hormones. And so I
Yes.
came up with the 12 most common hormone issues that I see in the
Right.
clinic, and I put them into the verbiage of
Mm-hmm.
archetypes.
Yes.
And
I love
so
that.
I thought initially that the initial one would be estrogen dominance. I thought that one would
Hmm.
be far and away, PCOS and
Right.
neuroendocrine disruptors and obesity and all these things. But
Right.
reality is far and away, like not even close in all the age groups, low testosterone, low
Yeah.
testosterone.
Hmm.
And so that's huge. Estrogen
Interesting.
dominance is probably second. And then
Okay.
subclinically low thyroid. That's
Mm,
not necessarily diagnostic. Like a doctor wouldn't look at those results and say it's in the abnormal range,
right.
but it's low, like you're in the basement of normal, and they have all the
Right.
symptoms. So
Got
those
it.
3 would be the 3 big ones I see all the time.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about those. What low testosterone?
Hmm.
What are some signs and symptoms that somebody might have that?
Low testosterone is a lady that wants to go to bed at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, has to take a nap.
Mm,
She has hair thinning.
mhm,
Workouts, if she's used to working out, might not be as good as they used to. I
mhm.
generally kind of phrase it like, if it was a t-shirt, it would just say meh. Like you're there, you're going to
Yeah,
get stuff done,
right.
but you're not going to do it with style, and you could really
Right.
care less. You just have no motivation.
Mm,
That sex drive is part of that.
okay.
And you
Right.
just, you're the kind of person that on a Friday afternoon, you close the door when you get home, and you might not come out till Monday. It's just, you just don't have any
Mm,
desire to do anything, but you will
yeah,
if you have to, your heart's
right.
not in it.
Right. Yeah. It's like they're, missing that fire.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. Yeah. I'm sure that resonates with so many women. I mean, typically from my knowledge, that tends to happen as we age, but you're seeing that in younger women too.
Yeah, it's really prominent
Okay.
in young women because
Ah.
of birth control pills. I mean,
Mm,
birth control pills raise hormone binding globulin,
right.
which then
That's what I was
lowers the free
thinking.
testosterone. And
Right.
I see it all the time. And
Yes.
the problem is with young women, a decreased sex drive in a younger woman that's in her 20s is more psychologically impactful on her than it is maybe in someone in their 50s,
Hmm.
because she just feels abnormal. She's with a partner that's probably a little more sexually active, and it causes
Hmm.
problems with her relationship. And so
Right.
that's something that we definitely need to be looking at.
Yeah, not to go off on a tangent on birth control, but I feel like this discussion has again come into the forefront
Hmm.
with birth
Hmm.
control now being over the counter.
Yep.
All of this buzz about that. And it's such a polarizing subject. I really see both sides. I just think it's so fascinating. Some of the studies we have, some of the ones that really fascinate me about some of the on birth control is women choosing partners that are less
Yeah.
air quotes masculine, or they're
Yeah.
choosing partners because they lose that sense, whatever it is, pheromones.
Hmm.
It's just fascinating to me, and I really hope we have more research as we continue to use contraceptives like birth control.
Yeah, and the two things that I thought of when that came out that they're going to be having over the counter, and I
Hmm.
tried to make it not something that I was trying to say was a negative because,
Right.
you get criticized. Oh, you're just going to lose money because you're not having patients come visit you. I mean, whatever.
Right.
I don't need to see
Oh,
people for birth control, but so it's great, and it gives you more availability, which is great. The two things
yes.
that I have a problem with are women that might then choose the birth control pills to treat issues like
Hmm.
abnormal bleeding or no bleeding, or
Hmm.
instead of using it for just birth control. And second, and I think
Right.
this is going to happen once it goes over the counter, the insurance companies are going to then say, we don't need to pay for this anymore because it's now over the counter, like ibuprofen or
Mm,
whatever.
that's true.
And then what you normally were getting either for $0 through your insurance or $5 or $10, now you're going to
It's
have to pay
very cheap.
50 or $60 for, because now don't think they're going to be the only company when they see that money grab that's going to start making over the counter birth control pills. So
Yes.
it's going to change the dynamics greatly. And I just think it's really going to put more burden on women to then have to pay more for their birth control. But that's my opinion.
That's so true. God, I didn't think about that. There was so much hype about the male birth control pill and it completely disappeared.
It
Do you
will
remember
never
that?
happen. It will never happen in this country because
Uh,
there isn't a pharmaceutical company that's going to take the gamble. And just as well as I do that the
oh,
number of men willing to do that is going to be fairly insignificant,
right.
and they're just not going to make enough money on it. So I never think it's going to happen.
Gosh, what a shame. What a
I mean, it
shame.
could. Maybe I'm wrong. I think it probably could happen in Europe where maybe they're a little bit more
Yeah,
progressive, but
I think
I don't
so.
think it's going to happen here
Yeah,
anytime soon.
anytime soon. Dang, that was so promising. I was so excited. Finally.
That's why you don't hear
Um,
about it anymore.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Talk to us about the second archetype, estrogen dominance. There's a lot of
Yeah.
buzz about that on the internet. And one thing that I see too within some of these, categories is self-diagnosing and then seeking supplementation, obviously not going to the doctor and getting lab work done, but just, taking something like DIM when they think that they have symptoms of estrogen dominance and then potentially doing more harm than good. I mean, DIM can really impact estrogen, and say you might have some symptoms of estrogen dominance, but you really are like on the cusp of something like hypothalamic amenorrhea. You don't want to be taking something like DIM, right? I mean, how does that work?
I think
What
DIM, and I'll probably say something that might be a little bit controversial, but
say
DIM
it?
is one of the probably the most overutilized supplement on the
Mhm.
market, and it's
Yeah,
used by people
it's
that
big.
don't necessarily understand it.
Mhm.
DIM technically will
Right.
not lower your estrogen levels. It will help you move your estrogen from a carcinogenic estrone to a more positive estrone, but it's not going to lower your estrogen.
Lower it.
If
Okay.
you want to do that, you got to use calcium D-glucarate, which is another supplement, which is hardly ever used. And so a lot of people are on DIM. I take women off DIM all the time.
Yeah, me too.
But what happens, the problem with estrogen dominance, first of all, it's not technically a medical diagnosis. So the medical community would look at that similar to adrenal fatigue.
Yes.
And what I mean by it, and there's also people out there that will say estrogen dominance can be when your estrogen is just really high, or it can be with a normal estrogen and a low progesterone. I don't necessarily ascribe to that thought, because if it's a normal estrogen, if you're I like to see the estrogen and progesterone ratios around 10 or 20 to 1. And estrogen dominance, you see 300, 400, 500 to 1. But if you have an estrogen level of 50, which is not significant, it's pretty low actually, and you have a progesterone of 0.5, well, that's 100 to 1, but I wouldn't call that estrogen dominance. I would call that low progesterone. So there's different ways to look at it. I think it's very confusing. I think things are overprescribed. I think birth control pills are an estrogen dominant state.
Yeah.
There's times in your cycle when you're supposed to be estrogen dominant. So that, it's not a bad thing unless you're having symptoms. And that's what I always say about hormone issues is hormone imbalances aren't a problem unless you're having a problem with them. And, that's another thing is a lot of the quote unquote experts, like my colleagues who usually are female, I'm going to say that, are brutal in the sense that they just don't think hormone imbalances exist. They don't think you should have blood testing because they fluctuate. And these are coming from women. And usually they just they're unrelenting in their attacks on some of this stuff. And I really don't understand why.
Oh my gosh. I know. There's a lot of, I hate to use the word gaslighting, but in women's health in general. And I see that so much when, they're talking about hormones not being an issue for some of us, but they impact everything. So of course they can be off and they can cause symptoms. Your book, The Hormone Balance Bible, it has so much amazing information. Let's just kind of back up. Tell us about, like, overall, what are hormones? What do they do? And we should have started here, but just for listeners who are kind of stepping into this world, what happens when they're off kilter? What can we do to make improvements?
Well, hormones in general are just chemical messengers that go from the gland that releases them to a target organ. And that could be your ovary, it could be your adrenal glands, could be abdominal fat. I mean, there's different kinds, thyroid. And they send a chemical messenger to target organs, whether it's skin or hair, liver, wherever. And so they're always sending these messages. And when they're off kilter, to me, so let's say, like we talked about, low testosterone.
Right. Good example.
We have a range. So when you get a lab test done, first of all, let's say it's free testosterone, because that's the active form of testosterone in your body. A free testosterone that's quote unquote normal is 0.2 to 6.4 in most labs. Now that is a 32-fold increase. Okay. It's basically from California to New York in the amount, the size of it. So to say that your let's say you come in at 0.8 or 1 and you feel all those symptoms that I just told you, but I could multiply your level 6-fold and it would still be normal for a woman, but you might feel a hell of a lot better. So what we're doing to women by saying your levels are normal and she feels like garbage is gaslighting, because we're telling her, we're negating her symptoms simply because we have a number that is, now if she feels horrible and her free testosterone is 5.4, well, that might not be testosterone then. Maybe it's thyroid, maybe it's something different. But to just, when women get their labs drawn, if you feel, I always say this, if you feel bad, and you're the only one that knows how you feel.
Right.
And you're told your labs are normal, just see somebody else. I mean, especially if you look at the numbers on your lab slip and they're in the low end of normal.
Right.
And also make sure your doctor or your provider is getting the right labs, because if you just get a total testosterone, can't tell you how often I'll see a testosterone, which normal for a woman is up to like 64-ish. Like it'll come back around 40, which is great, but her free is 0.4. So she's got something binding up her testosterone. So we got to figure that out. And estrogen, I mean, obesity, what you eat, are you using neuroendocrine disruptors, makeup, hormones in food and stuff like that. So those are things that you have to look at.
This is such an important conversation. And I'm like starting to get so excited because like finally like, okay, we're sitting down with an actual doctor. Okay, now we get to ask all the hard questions.
I'm an actual doctor, but I don't play one on TV. I wish I could, but
yeah, with the labs, the whole abnormal, normal, optimal lab question is just so huge. And it does us such a disservice when we get, labs done. We don't even know what we're asking for. We don't even know what's actually going to get run once we ask that. And then what happens is we get an email with a bunch of random numbers, and half the time they don't even include reference ranges. So we just get these random numbers with all these acronyms. We have no idea what 90% of the acronyms mean. And we have no idea what it means when something's, out of range or suboptimal. And we have no explanation. It's just, we are left with so many questions. And, obviously we're all paying top dollar for this type of care. I really hope that our healthcare system changes, specifically when it comes to lab work. It's so confusing. I'm confused, and I work in, this field. So I can only imagine what it's like for some of our listeners and, clients and patients. And
well, I think half the
members.
time they can't even get the damn labs ordered that they asked for. The doctors will say you don't need them. And this is funny. It's like, I always like to try and interpret doctors. Like I wish, that movie, Up, where the dog wears the color that translates.
Yes.
So I wish we had that for doctors. And when they say, oh, you can't draw hormones because they're always fluctuating. What that would actually say is, I don't want to know what the results are because I don't know what to do with them. That's what that should say. Or I'm just being lazy. And guess what? Here's the reality. OB-GYNs, and I'm going to blow the lid off of what I do for a living. We get paid. I don't do OB anymore, but we get paid more for our deliveries. When you deliver a baby, you probably get somewhere around $3,000. Now it's for 9 months of work, but it's $3,000.
Yeah, except my doctor got more because my babies are really cute, so they got double that.
You pay more of that. Yeah. But if you wanted to come in and just check for hormones, they might get $60-$75. And so, and I would say because you don't feel good, it might be more involved. Like, and a lot of the women are educated about stuff now. So they come in, they ask lots of questions that the doctors may even not know the answers to. And so that's embarrassing. And so we tend to have ways of, like you said, gaslighting, kind of just pushing you off a little bit, saying, oh, you're fine. Oh, you're just getting older. All that stuff, or you look great. That's the other one. Oh, I mean, you're so pretty. I mean, like they would say that to you. You look fine. You're pretty. You don't have anything to worry about. And it's like, come on, really? And men and women do that. And whenever it's called a patriarchy, it angers me because it's a doctorarchy. It's like, there's 75% of the practitioners in GYN are women, and they're just still propagating the same crap. And so. And maybe that is a patriarchy they feel obligated to, but I really think the women are in this profession are very empowered and they're strong. And if they really wanted to, they could break out of it. They just don't want to. I think they believe it. And it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of what we're stuck with right now.
I know, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we just have to do the best we can. I think, like you said, try and find an alternate provider that is going to listen, because for every person who talks about, a doctor that was unhelpful, I hear about someone who has an incredible one, who will go the extra mile to run the labs and to, get to the bottom of something that's really pressing.
You'll find somebody. Yeah. If you try, you'll find someone.
There's no way around it. PCOS is complex and multifaceted. What we know about it, including how best to treat it, is constantly changing. That's why I've dedicated my life's work to helping women put their PCOS into remission. Inside my signature program, the PCOS Boss Academy, women lose weight permanently without restriction and master their most stubborn PCOS symptoms. If you're looking to get pregnant or want to be a mom in the future, my ultra successful Get Pregnant with PCOS program supports moms to be every step of the way in conquering PCOS symptoms and bringing home the baby of their dreams. Plus, there's an additional weight loss mode to check into. These are all of the science-backed nutrition and lifestyle tweaks you need to improve your PCOS and change your life from a qualified healthcare provider and leading PCOS expert in the field. Ultimately, we are in control of our PCOS, and I would love to work with you inside one of my upcoming programs so you can step into the best version of yourself and start feeling like you again.
Let's talk about endocrine disruptors, because you talk a little bit about this, and it's a, ever evolving topic, and it's definitely a big one as we just move more and more and more into our society that, utilizes plastics for everything. Tell us what they are, what they are, why they matter, and kind of your opinion on them.
The big ones are like bisphenol A. That's like the plastics, water bottles, food storage containers, dioxins, polyfluoroalkyl substances or PFASs, phthalates, which are phthalates are in a lot of
fragrance.
I don't know if y'all follow Paul Saladino, but
I don't
Carnivore
know.
MD, but he was just standing outside of Bath and Body Works.
Okay.
You know how that store just stinks. It's like that smell.
Oh, it smells like my youth.
Yeah, it's really kind of over, and it even creeps out into the mall. And those are phthalates, PCBs, triclosan. When I was removing Essure coils, or I still do, those were coated with polyethyl terephthalate.
Sorry, what are those?
So Essure was a medical device from 2002 to 2018 that was a little metal coil that was put inside fallopian tubes to sterilize women, so we didn't have to cut.
Oh my God.
And the way that they worked was they caused inflammation. Well, looking not at that now, it's like how stupid that you would put something in a person that caused inflammation, but it would cause inflammation and the tube would scar shut. And so but the problem was they didn't stop causing inflammation. They didn't have an off switch. So that's a problem. But there's ways that you can get rid of some of those, like I said, to try to limit your fragrances, or use maybe essential oils, try to limit plastics. Don't eat your vegetables out of cans, try to get rid of pesticides, which is huge for me because I'll freely admit, I never used to wash my fruit. I would just eat it out of the box. Use filtered tap water. Cosmetics, be really smart about using, makeup. And also another thing is the stuff that you're putting in your laundry and then that you're cleaning your house with, those are all potential risks.
Totally. I love that you mentioned all of those. And it's one of those things that it's like, you can't completely avoid these things. I mean, they make up such a big part of our lives, but just doing the best you can with what you got, I think is key.
Well, I mean, I love, Mademoiselle by Chanel. It's like my favorite. And if someone wears it, I'm just in love with them. And I wouldn't want that to go away. And so, and that's the problem. See, perfumes and colognes are in this weird category where if you've noticed, they don't have to list their ingredients. Ever on perfumes. They don't list anything. And they're protected by some old law. And so
interesting.
You really need to be aware of maybe what's in them, especially if you wear these things a lot. If if it's just once a week or something, it's probably not a huge deal.
Right. Yeah. And it's what you do the majority of the time that matters the most. What are like three of them? I love doing this. Three common women's health myths that you hear, and we've already busted a few of them, but let's bust them because I definitely want to hear what your opinion on this is.
Oh, things like big one, that weight gain is normal as you age. Or you're just getting older. You need to in that same category. You need to eat less and work out more, especially with PCOS. I mean, those poor women, they
Yes.
need, it's like turning around, a cruise liner, because it's not just so easy to say, oh, don't eat.
Right.
So that's pretty frustrating one. The
Yes.
other one we've kind of mentioned is you don't need to test hormones, and because there aren't hormone imbalances. Why would you want to test your hormones? Is another big one. And another one that is a myth is, I think, endometriosis, PCOS, pelvic pain, things like that, heavy periods should be treated with a birth control pill as a first line agent, because the reality is you're not really telling anybody why they had the problem.
Right.
You're just covering it up. And
Right.
again, lazy medicine, which is what I would call that, because you don't even try
Right.
to figure out what the problem is.
Right.
And then the
So
last
true.
one, I'll give you four. The last one I always say is normal isn't always normal. If you don't feel normal,
Right.
then that's not your normal.
Right.
And when we do labs, when you look at the range on a lab, what they do to find those ranges is they'll say, we're going to take 1,000, 5,000 people that are normal, that are reporting that they feel normal. Okay. Now, who knows
Oh,
what that
yeah.
means? Usually when
Right.
you're enrolled in a study, you get
What
50
is that?
bucks. So whether they feel normal or not, who knows? And what they'll do
50
is they'll
bucks.
take the
Woo.
top 5% and the bottom 5%, and they'll exclude those. And then the 90% in between is normal. But I think that's such a huge issue, because that doesn't tell you, especially with thyroid, where is your normal?
Right.
You might be in the 20th percentile of normal,
Right.
and you might feel horrible, but you might feel better in the 80th percentile of normal. And who knows where that is? But what we do is, we, as doctors, we just say, oh, it's normal. See ya.
Yep.
Can't
Right.
do anything, because we're
Yes.
so afraid to break this mold. I mean, even now, if I give somebody a thyroid prescription, like NP thyroid or something, but their free T3 is normal, but it's like in the basement, I'm always worried that some doctor is going to report me for prescribing a thyroid medicine to somebody who has a normal, even if she comes back and she's like, oh my God, you saved my life, I feel so much better.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
You just never know.
Yeah.
And to their
Totally.
defense, to my doctor colleagues' defense, there are people out there that overprescribe
Yes.
and put people on too much, and
Yes.
that can be a problem as well. So, you got to look at both sides of the coin, I guess.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's a why behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you one question and then a hard question. My first question is, how much training did you get on PCOS specifically? I'm so curious, because I just feel, I mean, I did not go through medical school. I talked to, I have a lot of doctors in my family and I picked their brains on it, but I always like to know.
Well, you don't get any training. Everybody always says, oh, they don't get trained in medical school. Well, in medical school, you're just kind of learning the basics of everything.
Education. Sorry.
And
Yeah.
so there's
Education.
so much you have to learn.
Yeah.
It would be like saying in the first year of college, you didn't learn anything about calculus or whatever. I mean, it's like, okay, well, because I didn't specialize in calculus.
Totally makes sense.
So that's what happens. But when you get into residency, you see for 4 years, we do clinic. And in those 4 years, you see tons of people with PCOS. The problem is you're getting taught by, usually, like when I was a resident, the doctor that taught us in clinic he had to have been 75 or 80.
Okay.
Really nice guy, donated his time, did what he could to train us. But I'm learning from a guy who would tell me, the reason you're called residents is because when I was a resident, they actually physically lived in the hospital. They had an apartment in the hospital.
Okay.
And that's why they were called residents. And so,
wow.
that's how old he was. And so I'm learning from this guy who,
yeah.
I mean, he just was teaching me what he knew.
Right.
So you're learning this older paradigm. And I think that's why it sticks, because then you keep relearning things.
Yes.
So, but we see PCOS a lot. It's just, what type of management did we learn? Unless you have a progressive instructor while you're in medical school, or you're the kind of person that, like my son, he's in medical school right now. He's in his third year, and he's always asking me stuff, and he has me to kind of mentor him.
Right.
But my parents didn't go to college, so I just had to learn from these guys and women. And so that's why I think it propagates. And
Yes.
it's not that you don't learn it, it's that you learn what you learn. And,
Yes.
it's just the way it is.
Nothing changes if nothing changes.
Right.
What about nutrition?
Same thing. Although I would say less so. We definitely don't learn it in probably medical school per se, maybe a few hours. And then in residency, no, I don't think I learned anything about nutrition in residency. But, keep in mind, I was a resident 94 to 98. So
Right.
we didn't even really talk about food as medicine back then.
Right.
Might be more so now. The University of Arizona has partnered with probably 30 or so medical schools in the country right now, where usually it's a family practice resident though that learns that.
Okay.
Not really OB yet that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about, because so many clients of mine talk about how their doctor recommended, a specific diet for them. And I'm so curious about how they got to that place, without having ample training in the same way that somebody like a dietitian who goes to school, has a master's in that does. It's so interesting to me. I really become curious about that whole process and that whole, because, they get told things and I'm like, wow, I would never, no colleague of mine would ever tell them to go try to get into ketosis, to take 10 pounds off. It's amazing to me. And I really become curious about that. I don't know if you run into that too.
It's the same as anybody else. I mean, I would learn nutrition from reading about it on the internet. Again, how dedicated are you? And then you tend to propagate the plan that you resonate with, I think. Like Saladino, he's a psychiatrist by trade. So he obviously had no nutrition training. And he only eats carnivore. He doesn't eat vegetables, which I don't agree with. So I would never tell somebody to do that.
How are his bowels though? I'm just curious. I don't want to know actually.
Him and some of the other folks out there, they say they're great. But I think it's probably
would be in ruins.
It's probably one of those things where for some people it works, the body's different. I don't think I could physically do it. I can't do keto for very long. I can maybe do it for a week. Yeah. But I remember way back when Atkins was the thing.
Yeah.
And I was like doing that. I was like doing Atkins and I had to get to the point. I'm like, I just want something sweet. So there was a recipe for this like Atkins ice cream that I made. And it was horrendous. I mean, it was like full of
meat ice cream.
It was gross. It was disgusting. And yet, I was like pretending it was good. And it's like, if you want the ice cream, just eat the damn ice cream just once in a while.
That camp.
And so I'm kind of like, just like I am politically, I'm just a real moderate type person. I kind of keep in the middle. I just think that's the best way to live your life. I don't think extremes ever really work long term for most people. Right. And then the people that quote unquote have these massive transformations, they're usually using other things, probably peptides or hormones or other things that are helping them, maybe even now like semaglutide or something. And so most people can't look like those folks do just changing their diet unless they were massive or something to begin with.
Exactly. Yeah. That dramatic transformation. Yeah. Well, since you brought it up, let's talk about semaglutides. What's your opinion? What's your thought on that? Obviously it's, a hot topic right now, especially working in weight loss.
I guess there's a good way and there's a bad way, just like anything else. And just like everything else in medicine, we have physicians out there that want to make a quick buck. And so what they're doing, there's a plastic surgeon here in Austin who has the skinny shot, and it's compounded semaglutide, and it's $200 a month. And you go in and you get your shot and once a week, and he's banking on you coming in to do other stuff. But once you stop the shots, you gain all your weight back because there's no mindset, there's no nutrition, there's no exercise, there's nothing, there's no program, there's no, no talk about anything. It's just come in and get your shot. So these people lose weight and then they 85% just gain it back. And that's why I'm a fan. That being said, I think these medications, this is just my opinion, could have the possibility to change the way people with obesity live their lives. I think it can be quite miraculous. I think,
totally.
but then they need somebody like you to teach them while they're losing the weight. Because here's the thing: when you have that curbed appetite and you don't have what I found, because I'll admit I lost 40 pounds on Mounjaro, and what I discovered, I have health coaches, I do supplements, I have all these things. What I found was I had a dependency on food. I would literally, so it was a social construct for me.
Yes.
It made me happy.
Right.
I would go out with people. I would always look forward to lunch. At 10 o'clock, I would go to the cupboard. It was my routine. Get some crackers and honey. Oh, honey is good for you at 10 p.m.
10 p.m. I was like, yeah.
And I go, but now if I do it,
Yes.
so like now I'll go to the cupboard and I'll be like, okay, are you hungry?
Right.
Or are you just wanting to put something in your face? Because that's really what it is. I'm bored.
Yes.
And it's like, why don't you just go to bed and not eat the crackers? Or if I do give in, like the other night, I think I had like 3 tablespoons of ice cream. And I was like, fine with that, because now I don't have it's an addiction. And I always say,
true.
the problem with food addiction like that is that when you have an alcohol addiction, you don't have to drink alcohol, but you have to eat. And so you're addicted to something you're addicted to something you have to eat. You have to do it.
Right.
And yet you're addicted to it. So it's really hard.
Oh, that's interesting. Because with alcohol, you could remove it from your house. It's not there. It's not there.
Yeah.
But you cannot take the food out of your house. I've never thought about it like that.
And you could go buy good food and you're not going to get fat just eating tons of broccoli all day. But the problem is most of our food, as you probably know better than I do, is so calorically dense. It's full of stuff to taste good, and I think it causes addictions, a lot of the MSG and all that stuff that's in food.
Yes. My goal is to bring a food scientist onto this show and talk to us about how it's, made to be addictive. Yeah.
I think it's scary.
It really is.
I think that really is a problem. And sugar, it used to be sugar, 1,000 years ago was actually like a tradable thing because of the way that it made people feel. It's like a drug. And if you look at studies done on sugar, when people eat sugar on PET scans, it lights up the same part of your brain that cocaine does.
Right.
And so, hello, it feels good.
Just do cocaine instead of your
you'd lose
10
weight.
o'clock cupboard.
You'd actually lose weight. I wouldn't sleep, but I could.
Right.
You
wouldn't go to bed.
But I think
don't do that.
It's it's a great way to look at this paradigm. And but here's the thing: I had a lady the other day, or a few months back, pre-diabetic, hypertensive, 45, probably 50 pounds overweight, has a 4-year-old. Her parents are diabetic. One of them lost their foot to the diabetes already. She's crying because she's tried everything according to her. And medicine could say, the doctor will walk out and go, yeah, right, she's really tried everything, whatever. But some of these women have.
Oh, yeah.
They've tried it.
100% agree.
Put her on semaglutide. She's down 30 pounds. She feels amazing. She feels more empowered to now make those decisions.
Yes.
And that's sure at some point I got to hand her off to herself and she's got to do it. But that's why I'm encouraging her, get a nutritionist, get a trainer at the gym, get a health coach to keep you on track, even if you're just checking in once every couple weeks, because then if you gain those 5 to 8 pounds back, you'll go, okay, I got to go back to this, and you'll know what to do. But
so true.
But what happens is, because I got there, I just felt like, and I'm a doctor, I know what to do, but I just felt like I couldn't do it. I was just like, I'm so far gone. Why bother?
Right. Yeah.
And this gave me, it just empowered me again. It made me feel good about myself. And now I feel like, and then my daughter saw me and she's like, oh my God, what did you do? And she was overweight. And so I just feel like you just set an example. And I was a huge hypocrite because I'm talking to people telling them how to lose weight and I wasn't doing it. And so it feels more empowering, I think, overall.
Totally. I definitely understand that perspective. And I think it's really wonderful that you have walked through that yourself so that you can speak on that subject.
It's the one area of women's health that I can actually say I participated in.
There you go.
Yeah.
See, empathy.
So I'm gonna shout it from the rooftops.
Yes, I love that. And we have to wrap up here in a little bit,
Okay.
but I wanted to just, with the whole semaglutide conversation, it's one thing that I think it's important to realize with this is on the flip side, it's not helping us take any strides towards bettering our food system, which is really what got us in this mess to begin with, what I personally believe and I have seen in my professional experience. And that's the part that irks me, because it's, we're not thinking back to how do we we are, as you just, you just said, but we're not thinking, how do we go backwards now and get back to the food system that we used to have and get away from all of this, genetically modified, genetically engineered, all this new lab meat coming out. I have different thoughts and opinions on that. Just our food system is just shit. It's just shit. So it makes me sad on one side that we're not also, as a collective whole society, figuring out how to make improvements there. There's so much work to be done there. And I really hope that despite, different advancements that come out here, which are wonderful, we can still think about that too, because that's what really landed us here, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground, and this has been such an amazing conversation. I want to kind of wrap up with how listeners what guidance you might have for them in terms of bettering their relationship with their doctor, getting more out of their visits, anything you can think of, because there's such a divide, and I really hate that. I really speak out against that. And I really, look at the healthcare system as a whole. But lots of women, wondering how to make the most of an appointment, how to get the best out of their, communications and interaction and relationship with their doctor. Can you speak on that? It's as far as that goes?
Well, keep in mind, if you go to a doctor that takes insurance like me, you're going to have probably 15 minutes at the most.
Right.
So go in with your questions prepared. And if I have a woman that comes in with 20 questions, I'm going to probably ask her to pick 4 or 5 of them, just based on time. Right. Now, if I started taking cash and I could do an hour, that would be great. But if you want to use insurance, this is what we're talking about.
Okay.
And then, do your research, kind of have in your mind what you want to feel like. Don't just go in with how you feel. What do you want to feel? And then go with your gut. If you don't like the answers, be kind, be polite.
Yes, yeah.
If you can't, I've always seen questions like, what can I do to you can't make your doctor do anything. You can't, it's not going to happen. If you feel like you have to make them do it, then just go somewhere else.
Yes.
Ask around, ask your friends. That's how a lot of women find me, is they'll say, oh, I was just talking about somebody, how I was so tired. We were playing pickleball, and she's like, oh my God, I feel so much better because I saw so-and-so.
Yeah.
And that's how you find people that work with you. And I'm licensed in 14 states. And luckily a lot of docs are doing that. So go in with questions, have an end result that you would like to have, and it doesn't have to be, make it a big, crazy dream, don't just think, oh, I just want to sleep better or whatever. Think about how you want to feel. And then I always say, if I can get you 80% there, is that going to be good enough? Because I can't get 100%, but 80 is probably good. Yeah. And then do your research. Like I said, don't take, no for an answer, in the sense that if they tell you they don't want to do this, they don't think this or whatever, just go out and find someone else, and chalk it up to your education, but ultimately use your intuition. If you get a bad feeling, if you feel like, I can't tell you how many women that come to me that this is a great story. A young woman, 40 years old. She's a physician assistant, so pretty educated.
Totally.
She was having just horrible time. She was going to the ER like once a month, just horrible fatigue, couldn't get out of bed. And she's working, full time. And her friend called me and said, a friend of mine, friend of hers, mutual, said, can you just see her? Because I don't know what's going on with her. I just took her to the ER last week. So sure enough, I draw hormones on her. She's overtly hyperthyroid.
Wow.
The labs, she's literally hyperthyroid. Rarely see that, but she's hyperthyroid. So I get an ultrasound. The ultrasound shows a nodule on one of her lobes of her thyroid that looks potentially suspicious for cancer. So I
Mm-hmm.
send her to an endocrinologist. The endocrinologist says, really the ultrasound looks fine.
Okay.
I think if we just redo it in 3 to 6 months, you'll be fine. And I'm like, screw that. She doesn't feel fine.
Right.
So I sent her to a friend of mine who's a thyroid surgeon who biopsied it in her office, and she had thyroid cancer.
Oh my
So you
gosh.
even have an educated human who can't get help. She's in the medical system and she can't get help. And
Yeah.
so the beautiful
Mhm.
thing about that story was that now she's more enlightened and empowered, and she's now pushing that forward in the patients that she sees. So part of the
Yes.
problem is, unless you're actually a patient like me with weight loss, it's
Right.
easy. People will look at you, Corey,
Yes.
and go, oh, she's so pretty. She's so skinny. And
Oh,
they don't know
yeah.
that you've had PCOS. A lot of them that might see you at the grocery store. You're trying to tell them, oh,
Right.
eat this, don't eat that. And they're like,
Yeah. What
excuse
do
my
you
language,
know?
but to be like,
Yeah.
skinny bitch, whatever,
Right.
But
They don't know I
but
wasn't
they don't know
always.
your
Yeah.
story. And the
No.
fact, I always say the wounded
Right.
healer is probably the best healer, because we've been
Agreed.
there. And I think with me and gynecology,
Mm-hmm.
if I had to pick a superpower, I would pick listening.
Yes.
And if you can just sit, that's what the doctor should do. I want a paradigm where we have an
Yes.
active patient, passive physician,
Right.
not the other way around, which is what we have. We have a
Yes.
active physician, passive patient. So that's what you
Yes.
need. You need a doctor that's just going to sit and listen to you and go, okay, I don't know what this is. I
Right.
don't usually test, but I'll do whatever you want because you feel bad and you're the patient. And tell you what,
Yes.
if you come back and we get these labs and I don't know what to do, I'll refer you to somebody that does. But at least they can
Right.
start the ball rolling. That's what I wish we
Yes.
had.
I am so right there with you. I know everybody listening is going to agree with literally everything you just said.
But I am the best doctor in the country.
He is
so
the best, listeners.
I'm America's holistic gynecologist.
That's right.
So. But there is no way around. There is no such thing as a holistic pap smear. Unfortunately, we still have to do the old-fashioned way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
If I could invent something where you have like
Yes.
a little pill, and it has a little camera or something.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I'll work on that. I don't know.
You should. You'd make millions. That reminds me of an experience I had recently, getting a pap. They called me and they said I had, I don't know how to, ascus or ascus or whatever. Ascus. And I was like, okay, like I know a little bit about that, but she told me to Google it. She said, well, here's the acronym and you can do your own research. Have a nice day. And I'm like,
Google it. What?
Well, yeah, she literally
So either she was too busy to explain it or she didn't know what it was. Either
right.
both of those
I would
options
hope it's
are horrible.
the first. Yeah, I would. Right. Yeah, both of them. I would kind of hope it was the first one, but we'll see you in a year kind of thing. So I was like, well, okay, like I'm not concerned. I had a leap a long time ago in the past, but anyways,
Ascus is atypical squamous cells of undeterminacy.
Yes.
Basically, it means it's not normal. It's not abnormal. We don't know what the hell to call it.
We
so
don't
we're
know.
gonna put it in here.
Right. Yeah. She's like, well, your HPV was negative, but just go.
So that means a pap smear in a year. Yeah.
Right.
And usually what that is just
research.
it might be a little inflammation.
Right.
You could have had sex the day before. It's really, unfortunately, they told you to Google it, which is ridiculous. But
I was like, okay, well,
I mean, what kind of a practice would that be if I just drew labs and then I said, oh, go Google that? I don't really know.
Yes. And when I actually talked about it on my Instagram stories, you won't believe, or you probably will actually, how many messages I got back saying that they had experienced something similar, as far as being kind of told to do their own research. So that's what we're working with here. And that's why it's so refreshing to have somebody like you. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime.
Please tell listeners where they can find you, how your Instagram, your website, how they can work with you.
I'm not as cool as you. I don't have near as many followers as you do.
I'm not that cool, but thank you.
You're pretty cool. Shawn Tassone, MD on Instagram. I've got 2 websites. One is kind of for just general stuff, like for appointments. That's Dr. Shawn Tassone, Dr. Shawn Tassone.com. And then my one for kind of all the holistic stuff is tassonemd.com. The big thing is if you go to tassonemd.com/quiz, we all have quizzes, but my quiz is 36 questions and it's mathematically weighted on the back because I majored in math in college. So I'm kind of a nerd. Nice. And it will give you one of those 12 hormonal archetypes. So if you're interested, it's not like It's not like doing blood, obviously. It's a
Right. No,
guess
that is
based on your
very cool.
symptoms, but it
I'm
gives
gonna
you a
take it.
starting point. If you're up at midnight and you're bored, go check it out. My book is The Hormone
Cool.
Balance Bible, published with HarperCollins in
Yes.
2021.
Definitely check that
and-
out. I will
And I'm
link
on
that too.
Instagram every Saturday on Instagram. I do Q&A sessions. So
Mm.
anybody that's got questions, I try
Awesome.
to answer those. I'm in Austin, but I'm licensed in 14 states. So if it's one of the states, I usually post that on Instagram. I can actually be your doctor.
It's amazing. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Congrats on the podcast. And like I said,
Thank
when you were on my podcast a
you.
few weeks ago, let's get this book out.
Yes, I cannot wait. Yes, sometime next year.
Great.
Hopefully.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.